Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. Happy New Year. So we're a little bit into the new year, 2024. If you're listening when this comes out, how are you doing? Are you recovering? Are you having a sense of newness and freshness? And if you're not, it's okay. This is an interesting episode. Jen and I are both struggling. We're fine, but we're not doing great. I have some health things going on that I talk about more due to the process of what's going on around the health things. And Jen has some stuff going on. And we talked about not recording today just because we're both not in a great place. We've had to cancel a lot of our recordings for a number of different reasons. And we just really wanted to show up and be authentic with how we're doing, even though it's not a great place. I think there's some great stuff in this episode. We talk about this concept of being perceived. If you don't know what that is, I think it will resonate. We talk about PDA, expression of pain, allowing people to know that you're in pain, asking for your needs to get met, having competing needs, misunderstanding when you need something. I think this is a very relatable episode. And my whole mission for this podcast was wanting people to know that there's nothing wrong with you and that you're not alone. And that means when Jen and I are struggling, we still show up when we can to talk about what's going on. So I think that this is a really relatable episode. I think there's some really good information in it. And my hope is that you find some value in it. If not, that's okay too. I think that's all I have. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia. Well, you know how I am.
do.
I'm having one of those days where I am not sure I have anything to offer anybody, if I'm honest, but I like our plucky energy of just hitting record and going for it. And I'm here. I'm here to show up. I'm here to show up just as I am. I'm feeling really blah. I'm feeling, I don't know, can't quite shake it this year. It's, I don't like it.
Yeah, it's not fun. You're not alone. I'm right there with you. We've had to cancel a bunch of recordings for a number of reasons, so we're very behind on recording. I'm tired. I don't want to be here. I'm struggling with some health things that I want to talk about because I think it may be helpful, not specifically what's going on with me, but the process around it. But I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I'm having some health things that are not resolving the way that I thought they would, being in that uncertainty and feeling uncomfortable. It's just hard. And what my hope is that you and I are just modeling how do we show up and do life even when it's hard, even when it feels yucky, even when we don't feel great. And can we find some grace? I mean, I've had a lot of self-criticism, a lot of judgment. I don't feel like I'm navigating this in this beautiful, graceful way, but we're both kind of showing up and being where we're at. And can that be enough? And can that be okay?
I guess we're going to find out.
I know.
I was saying this might be the episode we have to trash because I'm completely useless today, but I would love to center. I mean, this is, I guess, one of my long-term 50-year coping mechanisms, right? Is just to center the other person and to center you. So I'd love to know how I can be here. I know you've been going through a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much of it you feel like talking about today. You usually have some idea, I think, about what we're going to talk about. My experience is like, show up, hit record, show up wholeheartedly, no matter if that heart is a little bruised up at the moment. But yeah, I'd love to know how I can be here for you today.
Thanks, Jen. You know, I want to give context around what's going on. It's not super relevant, but it's just part of the story. But there are some larger components to this that I think are really relatable for lots of people. So your story may not look the same as mine, but I think the process is very similar. You know, I've been having, apparently it's vestibular neuritis, which is inflammation in my inner ear, which is where the balance center is. And this started So we're recording on Monday morning. A week ago, Saturday, I woke up with some vertigo. I've had vertigo before, didn't think too much of it, was able to kind of manage. It was bad enough that when I need to take a shower in the morning, I'll ask my husband to make sure that he's close by just in case, I lose balance in the shower. And I did have to have both hands on the shower wall when I was taking a shower because I felt unstable, washing my hair and having to put my head back. I haven't used eye drops for a week. I'm supposed to use them twice a day, but tipping my head back causes vertigo. We did some errands. I thought I was fine. And then that afternoon, I really had bad vertigo and we were supposed to go to a holiday party. And there's something called the Epley maneuver, which I had done in the morning. It seemed to be okay. And I was doing more reading and you should do it 3 times in a row. And I did it. I had Steve sit with me and time me. And I thought the world was going to fall off of its axis. So there's a difference for me between like, oh, it's a little bit dizzy right now. I'm going to close my eyes and it resolves. And the world feels like it is just a gyroscope. And I had to reach out and touch my husband because I felt so untethered in this dizziness. I did not go to the party. And it was so bad that I sat in a recliner, basically with my eyes closed in the dark, because it was also like having a migraine where I was sensitive to light. I was sensitive to sound. My eyes hurt. I couldn't be on my phone. I couldn't be on the TV. It really was not fun. And I was going to sleep in the chair that night because I just did not want to move because any type of movement would activate this out of control dizziness where I was unstable on my feet. I was furniture walking. You know how kids lean onto the furniture, the doors, the bookcases. And when I would get up, I'd have to wait a minute to make sure I wasn't going to stumble and fall. And got through that night. And then Sunday morning, I felt really, really terrible. And we decided to go up to the ER. And I'm glad that we did. I had a sense that I was dehydrated, and I was. It took them 3 sticks to try and get an IV in me. And at that point, they had diagnosed me with just positional vertigo and gave me some meclizine for dizziness and Zofran for the nausea. Oh, that was the other thing. I had nausea. And they were very kind, wanted me to follow up with my PCP, but I felt so terrible. I think Monday it still lasted. So on Tuesday morning, I called the ENT to see if I could get in. I couldn't get in till Wednesday. And then Steve took me on Wednesday when he diagnosed me with the vestibular neuritis. I'll spare you the graphic way of how they administered some steroids to try and reduce the inflammation. I got a shot and also sent me home with some oral steroids, which meant that I couldn't sleep because I was so amped up from the steroids. And then there were side effects from the Zofran as well. It's like a bad party game. And I had expected I did feel better. And then Friday I was exhausted. I canceled clients all week. Thursday I was able to resume after getting this steroid shot. I thought, great, I'm on the mend. We're kind of heading back to normal. Of course, I'm not going to Aquafit. I'm not paddling. I'm not doing anything. And I'm pretty active. But I'm okay because I figure this is going to take a little bit of time for me and have this trajectory, this expectation of how I expected to recover. The universe just laughs when we think we know how things are going to go. So Friday, you and I were supposed to record. It didn't work for you. I was exhausted. It worked out fine. We had to cancel this week. I think you had something going on. I don't know. Maybe I had something going on. Who knows? And I took the weekend to just kind of recover. And I'm still having dizziness, and I'm having more dizziness, and it's not as bad as it was. So that's the good news, but it's lasting and it's getting more pervasive. And even if I don't move my head, if I move my eyes, I'm having dizziness, and I wasn't expecting this. I do have a follow-up with the ENT on Tuesday, but yesterday I was talking to you. I cried a couple times yesterday. I cried today. This being in this place of uncertainty and not knowing, is this going to be my new normal? Is this just part of what the process is? Am I just going to have vertigo for the rest of my life? Is this going to clear up? Is this just the way that it's going and we don't know? Is this the correct diagnosis? These things are really challenging for me. And I struggle because there's a part of me, and I feel grateful for this, that I'm grateful that it's not as bad as it was, that I am able to navigate around, that I'm able to have a little bit more independence. And, I've basically been in the house for a week. I don't feel safe driving because if I were to turn my head, that could activate some dizziness, and that's not safe. I don't have a desire to go out, but yesterday I told Steve, like, I just wanted to get out for a little while. It was so bad on Sunday when we went to the ER that I couldn't even have my eyes open in the car. And coming home, it's a 5-minute drive, it's flat, and it felt like with my eyes closed that we were going down a hill the whole time and that we're on the street, and it felt like he was driving to the left. Like my whole sense of equilibrium is just, it's shot. And I don't think that we realize how much we depend on our eyes. I spend a lot of time on screens, which I'm okay with. That really helps me self-regulate. And I picked up watching Gilmore Girls again, which I've seen before, and tried to watch TV with my eyes closed. But there are so many scene changes that it was really hard to track. And even in the ER, I brought a sleep mask because they were so kind. They put me in this room and they didn't turn the lights on. And I brought an eye mask that blocks out all the light. But even not knowing like who's coming in, is this the same tech that came in before? And they're going to do an IV, but are they going to tell me when they're going to stick me? It's just given me a whole new awareness. And what happens is while I'm struggling and not doing well, I'm also having this awareness of, and this is our high levels of empathy of, it could be worse. It could be like it was, which I think is good for perspective, but it also sometimes prevents us from just feeling how hard it is. Like, this is just hard. Yes, there are people that live with this. Yes, there are people that have it worse than I do. For me, this is really hard, being in the uncertain, not being able to navigate around. And I've noticed that there are kind of 3 aspects to this. One is the dizziness. One is the sensitivity to lights and sounds, which has gotten so much better. The other part is my nervous system. And there are days when I feel like my nervous system is just like there's no skin on my nerves. And that has been really hard. Steroids also are likely to cause irritability. And it's funny that my kids had asthma. And I was recalling that when one of them was on steroids, he kicked and spit on the doctor because it makes you aggressive. And the doctor was very compassionate. So I've told my husband, like, just be prepared for the irritability. And so far it's been okay. I was on edge yesterday. And so I have some things that I can kind of take to calm my nervous system. But even yesterday, it was hard for me to reach out to you. And, you were kind of struggling and you said you didn't feel like you were good entertainment. I feel like I'm in this place where I don't even feel like anything's entertaining. And my son and his girlfriend got here. They're going to be here for the week. And I was kind of struggling because I don't feel super interested in anything going on outside of my own experience. I'm pretty preoccupied with how uncomfortable I am. I feel raw. I don't feel social. And I just shared that. I was just really honest with them about what was going on when his girlfriend asked how I was doing. I'm like, do you want the fine answer or do you want the real answer that's not fine? And everybody has been incredibly compassionate and supportive, and people are checking in on me. And again, I feel very grateful for that. But this has been, it's just hard. It's hard to feel untethered. It's hard to not have independence. I'm sleeping on one side because as soon as I flip over in bed, I get dizzy. I mean, it's just like, this is not fun. This is not what I would choose. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. And, given the circumstances, what are ways that I can navigate it? And the other thing I want to share is I made a conscious choice back in September to change how I was eating because I was concerned about inflammation. I do better without certain foods. And as I've been not feeling well, and yesterday we went out and got food and I got stuff to have in the house, because I just want comfort. Is it going to make me not feel well? Is it going to cause more inflammation? It might. And do I have a little bit of judgment about that? Yeah. Does it make me uncomfortable physically to have some of this stuff? A little bit. And sometimes we're just going to do what we have to do. And can we find a way to have as much gentleness and compassion around that? Because this is just hard. And in a perfect world, I would handle it a certain way. It's not a perfect world. I'm not perfect. And sometimes we just need some comfort. So.
Yeah, those competing needs, right, can really get us sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, you have been navigating it beautifully. I mean, that doesn't mean it's easy, right? And taking really good care of yourself and giving yourself space and patience. I mean, I've watched you kind of do all of that all for the better part of a week now. It's hard to not know. I know, like, I get a cold and I wonder if I'm ever going to feel good again, and as you know, I have bouts of dizziness myself of a couple of varieties, and I think there's something about the switching if you can, it's just a little bit of a kind of into I wonder.
Mhm.
I wonder the best way to take care of myself and how this is going to go. And all the while, though, acknowledge that's not bypassing the scary, right?
Right.
It's kind of meeting the scary with that curiosity. I'm so glad that you are feeling better.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
little bit at a
Yeah.
time.
It's been really good to stay connected with you. Yesterday, I felt like I wanted to start pulling back. And you were sharing, don't let me go dark. If you don't hear from me for 24 hours, don't let me go dark, which was really helpful for me because when I get in this place, I start feeling like I'm too much and I'm boring. And if I didn't hear from you, then I would likely imagine that you're just having enough of me where you're going through your own thing. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that when we can communicate where we're at, we can still have that sense of connection. Even if when we chatted yesterday, it was a connection. Like, was it deep? Was it meaningful? Did I leave feeling connected? And no, but it was nice that we connected. And it was nice to go like, I don't have a lot to say. I don't have a lot to say. Thanks for calling, and to hang up. Like, that's a connection,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't, oh.
I loved it when you really made me laugh, and I was like, I don't feel like I'm being very entertaining. You're like, I don't think I'm very entertainable right now. That's okay. There's some space there for just being together in whatever the muck of the day is. I love that. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Two of the things that I've become aware of. Well, first of all, I started working with a therapist who's autistic, ADHD, has a PDA profile, and also has rejection-sensitive dysphoria. And so it's a perfect match for me. And I'm really, really enjoying the insights that feel like I'm pretty aware. But I love having somebody who is further along the path to guide me. And a couple of awarenesses that I've had around this that I think may be really relatable. When we talk about PDA, pathological demand avoidance, or pervasive or persistent drive for autonomy, it's about being in charge and our nervous system getting activated when we feel like we lose a sense of autonomy. So typically people do not tend to be very vulnerable because vulnerability is a loss of autonomy. And I've been kind of confused because, as you know, I rock the vulnerability. When I talked to my therapist about this, what she was saying is, I'm choosing to be vulnerable. It's not like people are walking up to me and asking me personal things, and I'm in charge of how much I share and who I share with. And it's interesting, as I've come out to you, the listeners, being autistic and my struggles, I post on social media to promote the podcast, but I haven't really formally come out to a lot of my colleagues and friends. I don't have a need to. They're not podcast listeners. As I'm saying this, I'm kind of laughing because it's like I'm telling a bunch of people, mostly that I don't know, my personal, intimate parts of my life, and I'm choosing to not share them directly with people in my life that have contact with me. That's probably part of my PDA. But because I write what each episode is about and post it on social media, I suspect that people have an inkling about what's going on with me. So that was one aspect of it. But the part that relates to this is I'm really starting to see how I internalize my sense of pain and discomfort. And there is this concept of being perceived. I suspect this goes with being autistic. I'm not sure if it's limited just to autism. And I was talking to my therapist because when I'm in pain, I usually do not make noise. I do not complain. I hold it in. Where I think I've talked about this, that my son and my husband tend to verbally, if they're in pain, they'll yell, they'll make noise, they will verbalize. And my other son and I are pretty stoic. And as I've been going through this process, I've been noticing, am I allowing myself to express pain, to verbalize? I'm probably very unlikely to ever scream out in pain. I just don't think that that's how I'm wired. But I have noticed that, like when I was dizzy and doing the Epley maneuver, I groaned. It was so uncomfortable and so disorienting. And I allowed myself to go like, which I wanted to do. I want to be more connected to that discomfort and not feel like I have to disconnect from it and hide it. So that was one of the things. And when we went to the ENT, again, I'm going to spare you how and where I received the shot, but the ENT described, how and where I was going to get this shot. and then took us to a procedure room, and we had a few minutes, and I allowed myself to cry because it felt really scary. It just felt really scary and uncomfortable. And I tend to not cry when it comes to medical stuff. When I was a kid, I had to get allergy shots twice a week. And I remember being praised that, like, a friend of mine also got shots there, and she would cry and scream. And I was praised for being quiet. And I've just learned to not fuss. And I think it's part of the PDA. It's part of how I feel about being perceived. And I really allowed myself to have that. And it's interesting too that, and I think I talked to you about this, Jen, that on Sunday when I was in so much discomfort and wanted to go to the ER, I really struggled because, again, and I think this has to do with this perception and this idea of every time I would get really dizzy, I would get hot and I just want to take off all my clothes. So if I was on the bed doing the Epley maneuver, off came the shirt, off came the socks, off, like I just stripped down because I'd get so hot. And I thought, if I go to the ER and I'm dressed and I have to disrobe, like, I can't do that. So I should probably dress in layers. And then I needed to take a shower and I need, all of these things. And I have these rules, and I think it's about perception. How am I perceived? What if I go in my pajamas? What if I go without a bra? I'm well endowed. And I have a lot of shame around my body, around not wearing a bra, around people seeing that I'm very well endowed. And I really, really struggled with, and the irony is you go to the ER because you're sick and you're not feeling well. It's not like getting dressed and going to the mall or going into work where the expectation is that you should look put together. But again, that's part of this idea of perception. How am I going to be perceived if I don't smell good? If I don't look presentable? If my hair is dirty? It's been so fascinating for me to see. And there is a loss of autonomy and control if my value is that people should be clean and presentable, whatever that means, if you go to the doctor or you go to the ER. So it's been fascinating for me to see all of these layers that are kind of on top of this whole experience and navigating through them and trying to have some different awarenesses about all the ways that it makes it hard for me to show up, and how I put off going to the ER because I really didn't have the energy or the strength to shower and get cleaned up. And I decided I'm sick, and I went in my bathrobe. I got a washcloth and, washed my bits and pieces and did what I needed to do to feel presentable. And I brought an emotional support blankie with me, which I'm glad I did. I needed that sense of comfort, and I held on to it because it was uncomfortable and not really fun being there.
No, I do remember you telling me about that, and my experience in that moment was just care and concern and wanting you to get over to the ER, just no matter how, whatever was going on. And I'm really curious about the PDA and I guess the inability to control other people's perceptions, of course, right? Is that the loss of autonomy? Right. And how do we reconcile or come to peace with that? Because that's not our lane, right? We can't control that. The whatever the narrative is that they pick up, or the freedom that comes in letting someone be wrong about us, like whatever that is, and still being able to just take care of yourself and show up as you are.
And when we're talking about this, we're talking about nervous system dysregulation. So we're not talking about cognitive, like, oh, you're sick, you don't have to clean up. Like, we're not talking about a cognitive exercise here. The whole reason why PDA is a thing is it's a nervous system dysregulation, and your body goes into fight, flight, fawn, or freeze,
fight or flight,
or people please. And so it's not something that we have conscious control over. And it's interesting too, I was talking to my mom about this. So the dizziness was so bad that when we got to the ER, I had Steve get a wheelchair because I couldn't ambulate. When they took me back and then they were wheeling me to a bed, I joked and said, like, can you go around the corners really quick, to the person that was pushing me. And I have a really great sense of humor, but I think that it does come from that place of PDA and fawning. I think it's very adaptive. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I do make lots of jokes when I'm getting medical care. I think it's disarming. I think that, and when we went to the ENT, my ears were so sensitive, and the ENT came in and I whispered, like, can you please use your inside voice? Because everything just felt really loud. It feels like often the medical practitioners, if they get my humor, they don't respond. And I'm okay with that. It's not like I'm trying to do stand up in the medical setting. But I think that it's something adaptive that I learned from my mom. I think it's a fawn, a people-pleasing response. I think it's a way that I navigate things that are uncomfortable. I think it's a very adaptive thing to do. So I don't see anything wrong with it, and I'm not going to change it.
It humanizes like what's otherwise a pretty sterile environment.
Yeah. And we feel so vulnerable. We feel so vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other parts about being perceived, and I've heard this a lot, that people don't like to clean when other people are around. Many of us were criticized for how we're cleaning or doing things. And I think why so many of us love being alone is that sense too of we are not being perceived. If we are alone, we are not being perceived. And that allows our nervous system to rest, because there's always that sense of nervous system dysregulation and activation if we're being perceived. So,
well, that's interesting, especially from a recovering Catholic point of view, where it almost always feels like something is watching you, and how activating and scary that can be, depending on which end of the education you got, as a kid. Yeah.
So not having to have demands made on you. And often how we deal with PDA is by people pleasing and anticipating what everybody else needs so that they don't have to ask us, so that it lowers those demands. And with the holidays, here's another thing. I really struggle with wrapping Christmas presents. And I really had to look at what this is. And it's this idea that every present should be wrapped beautifully, creatively, and it activates my perfectionism and my PDA and a loss of autonomy. This isn't the first year where I've asked my mom for help in wrapping presents. And then I feel guilty. This is like when Steve was out of town and I asked the neighbors to watch Gracie when she was still alive, because it was too much for me to walk both dogs. And then that guilt and shame of I can't even wrap Christmas presents. And I have a couple more that are coming in that I ordered. And I asked my mom and Steve, like, can you please help when they come in? And then yesterday we had a bunch of little things that I'd gotten when I was with you in Philly. And I kind of needed to decide how to divide them up and who I was going to give them with. And I got incredibly overwhelmed. Visually, it was hurting my eyes and my dizziness to try and stand and figure this stuff out. But also this sense of I have to do it perfectly and everything has to look a certain way, and that I just can't do that. And I decided, and I ordered some last night, I'm doing gift bags next year. Anything I give is just going to be in a gift bag.
Oh, good. You did order them?
I did order them.
Yeah, there you go.
But this is just another way that these things show up, and having that guilt and shame around having these needs and needing to ask for help, because part of me is just like, it's just presents, like just wrap them. And somebody doesn't give me a gift and I don't hold it up and examine it and like, did you use twine? And did you use this fancy folding? Like, I never do that. But I think that there are so many ways that these things impact us. And if we don't have the awareness, we may have narratives around like, I just don't wrap things, or I just don't do this, or I just don't do that, because we don't take the time to see what's underneath it. And these things affect us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think I might be in that camp.
Say a little bit more.
Well, just the sort of foreclosing or deciding early that it doesn't matter, or that sense of, oh gosh, gift giving. I know I did discover for me the pressure of finding like just the right gift, something that was supposed to represent a whole world full of feelings. Mm-hmm. And once I realized that there's really no way to do that, it took a lot of the pressure off. Yeah. Nowadays, I can have a little bit more fun with it. That's the gift giving part. And I guess I'm still kind of close to, I don't know, the kids just like tearing open their presents doesn't seem, I like matching. I like matching the different wrapping papers and stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's interesting what you're saying about what is this representing, right? What meaning are we making out of this? And then if you don't make, what's it mean when you don't make any meaning out of it? You're just like, okay, I'm just going to, good enough. Right. And sometimes I think, I don't know, it's like a missed opportunity to look and to show yourself compassion and to hold your heart kind of tenderly. I feel probably part of my state right now is about, I don't know, just wanting to kind of crawl under a rock and have it all pass me by. I'll wake up in the spring. I think I'm meant to be a bear. I should just be hibernating.
Right.
But part of that's just like, oof, I don't have it. I don't have it in me to do the work right now. which is so funny because it's like not something I would have said ever. I'm all about the work. Well, until I'm not, until I'm just too exhausted.
Well, the other thing is, without getting into content, what I'd like to validate for you, is this okay?
Sure.
You've had so much change in the last 2 years and a lot of loss, a lot of realizations, a lot of recognizing some things that happened that were really not okay. And, you've been in that process, and in setting boundaries and taking care of yourself, there still is loss and change. So you've had a lot going on, and I don't think that you're not wanting to do the work. I think that you're exhausted and burned out and you need some time to recover. It's kind of like where I'm at right now. It's not that I'm not feeling generative. I don't have it in me, and it's taken everything to keep sitting up straight right now. And every time you and I have talked the last week, my head is in my hands because I'm deeply tired, just deeply tired. And I feel like on an emotional level, you have that just soul fatigue.
Yeah, that's a good word for it, for sure. It is kind of a soul weariness, and I think resting is what makes sense right now, for sure. Ultimately, I'm hopeful, right, that it's kind of a rebuilding, letting go of what doesn't serve me. But it's kind of, I guess I've had to get off the train. Like, I've had to get off and find someplace quiet, which is fitting right now. I mean, I'm hoping to lay roots where I'm at right now and really just do that. And that's kind of quiet work, right? That's quiet inner work.
Yeah.
It's hard to even articulate, but thank you for that. I am trusting the process, whatever it is that's going on. And it's not too dark. Thanks for reaching out. Like, please don't let me go silent.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the challenges for me, to continue to reach out, because I end up wanting to stop it. If I perceive that you're not responding, then that activates my being too much. And so we're having to reestablish some new patterns in our friendship. And for the holidays, we talked about, like, what do you want to do about Christmas? Do you want to exchange gifts? Do you not want to exchange gifts? Because if I see stuff during the year, like when I went to Philly, I bought all this stuff thinking this is going to be great for the holidays, and it is, but I don't have anything in mind for you. And can that be okay? And can we navigate that and trust that it's not about giving gifts because it's a holiday and that's what we're supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good metaphor for stepping off of the train of 50 years of have to and really getting curious about wanting to. And
I think this time of the year, even though by the time you hear this, we'll be past the holidays, but as we're recording it, it's the 18th of December, but you won't hear this until we're about a month out. But I think that the holidays is just fraught with so much overstimulation and expectations and so many things to do, even if you love the holidays. And I think for many of us, it's overstimulating and overwhelming, and it's challenging. Even if we like some of it, it's really challenging time. And is it okay to just let that be okay?
Yeah. Well, it's going to have to be this year because I can't do much else.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been finding really comforting is rewatching series that I've seen before. And it's almost like if you've watched Gilmore Girls, like I just went to live in Stars Hollow on Saturday. And there's something about the rhythm of the show, and it's comforting, and I've seen it before, and it's soothing. And when my nerves feel so frayed and I don't feel like connection is going to be soothing, it was very sweet. Jean came over on Friday. She got some eye pads for me, that like the eye gel pads to calm my eyes. And she's made me 2 batches of soup. She's so sweet. And we visited for a while, and it was lovely connecting. But then I just feel like I don't have any more socializing in me. And like I want connection, but I don't feel connected. I don't feel interested. I don't feel interesting. And so that just wanting to cocoon and to kind of go to a place, and having to talk to Steve about our house is kind of an open concept. And if I'm in the living room watching Gilmore Girls all day, then there's not really room for him. And there's a room that he has a chair and a TV in, but asking, do you want me to go into the bedroom? But there's not a place where I can sit up so that my vestibular system is stable, so I'm not dizzy. So it's meant having to do a lot of negotiation. And this is tangential, but it's also relevant that one night he was going to go out and get something to eat, and I was wanting a different kind of soup. And this was when I was still trying to maintain what I'm eating and what I'm not eating. And He was willing to get it from me, but I get very overwhelmed with decisions. And because I don't know what's in the soup, but I know what I want, and because I don't know, like, if I eat dairy, is it going to activate, more of these symptoms for me? So not having a sense of what's going to work and what's not going to work. So I was overwhelmed. He got frustrated and he said something to the effect of like, well, if you can't figure it out, then, forget it. That may not have even been what he said, but what I felt was I was just too much. And he went off and got his dinner. And we talked about it later on. It's funny. He'd totally forgotten about the whole thing, totally had forgotten about it. But when we talked about it a little bit more, what he said is he feels so powerless because he wants to do something to help me and I don't know what I need and he doesn't know what to do. And so he gets frustrated. So that comment was out of frustration because he just wanted to do something that would bring me comfort. And I didn't know what that was because I go into all of these considerations about, is this going to work for me? Should I get it? Should I not get it? What's in it? And it was just interesting to talk about. And I think had we not had that conversation, I would have made a mental note of I'm being too much and I need to not ask for so much. And he's just getting tired of having to care for me. And I think these things happen very frequently in relationships. And when we don't go back and have these, what might be harder conversations or just getting curious, I would have just said like, I'm being too difficult and he's just getting tired of having to do stuff for me. And that was not the case at all. So are you able and willing to go back in with curiosity to get information?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like what he wanted was like more of when you do figure out what you want, like he would relish that. And otherwise the pulling back. I mean, I know that's how I feel. Like it's such a gift when you reach out to me, right? And our things that it's almost, it's funny. Some of the things that sort of universally David Barlow did research on, like what are some therapeutic concepts that are kind of go across theories that are helpful to people. And one of them is opposite action. It's like, and I think that's that paradox or that curiosity that it's actually the opposite. It doesn't mean we shouldn't validate how we're feeling and notice the pull. But I mean, there's two instances right there where what we're making meaning of naturally seems to be what to do is actually the opposite.
Right.
Of the leaning in and sounds like Steve would be delighted to have more of what you're needing, not less.
Yeah. Right? He is just amazing. For as much as I like, Steve. He is just so supportive and so validating and just allows me to be where I'm at. I can't tell you how many cries I've had about just how hard this is and how frustrating it is and his ability to just hold space for me when I'm struggling.
I'm so glad he's there for you.
Too. We are about ready to wrap up. Is there anything else before we go?
I know I had a thought back there somewhere and I didn't share it. Now I can't remember what it was. So I'm just going to trust that the good ones stick around and come back and have other opportunities to come out. Thank you. Thanks for having me and for doing this together.
How are you feeling now that we recorded?
I feel fine. I really do. I feel, and that's an authentic fine. That's like, I am willing to feel what I'm feeling. Right. And so it really is okay. And I'm happy that we decided to hit record, and I think I probably was a little quieter today, but that's okay. So yeah, I'm glad I'm here.
Me too. Appreciate you. So, if you're struggling, are there safe places where you can show up and be authentic and let it be okay and lower the bar and still have that connection, even if it's not a wonderful, yummy, satisfying connection, but it's a connection? Can you let it be okay to just be where you're at? And if you can't, that's okay.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Just fold that right in.
All right. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, my dear. See you soon. Bye.
Hey again. So how was that? Did anything resonate for you? Anything relatable? Any new insights? I'm going to keep this short because I'm tired and I really need to honor my body and rest. One of the things that we didn't talk about that my friend Jean had suggested that I talk to my therapist about, which I did, is this need to push through things and trying to figure out when do I push through and when do I slow down. And because I had to cancel so many clients last week and wanting to make up and allow people to get in before the holidays. And then really having to look at what is going to be kind and gentle for my body and allowing room for me to recover. And some of the values and challenges that I have around wanting to feel loyal and dependable and having clients count on me, and really needing to see that I'm medically compromised right now and I've got to take care of myself. And so do you do this to yourself? And I used to have this vision of I can push through anything. And the reality is, as I'm getting older and knowing that I'm autistic and seeing some of my limitations, my paradigm has shifted. It's a hard one, but that I have limitations and I really cannot push through as much as I thought that I could. And there's often a very serious price to pay when I do push through. And so really having to be, for me, realistic about some of my limitations and letting that be okay. And that's a tough one. That's a big, painful one. So anyways, if you are interested in working with me, you can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. If you want to work with Jen, you can reach Jen at heartfulnessconsulting.com. I think that's all I have. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. You have a right to be here. You have a right to be tired. You have a right to have a lowered mood. You have a right to rest, to not want to be out and to be social, to take care of yourself. You have a right to be joyful and happy, to set boundaries, to take care of yourself, to let people know what you're thinking and feeling. You have a right to stim, to make noise. I've been stimming in the kitchen. I do my little purr. My husband notices, and we talk about that thing about being perceived, and part of me feels embarrassed and exposed, but he's very supportive. And sometimes I just need to chirp away. So you have a right to stim and do whatever makes you feel comfortable and self-regulated. You have a right to ask for support. You have a right to not do things that are not comfortable for you. I don't think I have a lot in me today. So I think that's all I have. And I think I should have said the other part at the end. I'm just kind of tired. So hope you're doing well and have a blessed day.